All right, good evening, everyone. Mike's not able to be here tonight, so I'm going to sit in for him. So I'm going to go ahead and call to order the Board of Education meeting for tonight, June 28th. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next is action on agenda. You see the proposed agenda in board docs.
There are no changes to the agenda.
Thanks, Rich. Sorry. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Also move. Second.
All right, we have a motion from Joe, seconded by Dave, to approve the agenda as presented. Any questions or comments? All opposed, signify by saying aye. Or excuse me. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
That will say yes.
Aye.
Opposed. Thank you. Motion carries. We have an agenda. Next is the action on the minutes, which are in board docs.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes for the regular meeting held on June 14th, 2021 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion from Dave and a second from Leslie to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Any questions or comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Minutes are approved. Action on vouchers.
All right, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, the vouchers, of course, are attached to board docs as usual. And if you want to look at them for the moment, I will move to approve general checking account Fund 10 vouchers totaling $690,727.26 as presented.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion from Joe to approve the vouchers as presented and a second from Dave. Any questions or comments about any of the vouchers listed? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed. The vouchers are approved. Thank you, Joe. Next up is public comment. We have two people signed up tonight. First one is Michael Varan, who's going to speak on the Milton Forward Plan. Just a reminder.
the cafeteria space. You'll see final grading of our water retention basin. And then finally, you'll see asphalt work both at the behind the new addition and then in your existing parking lot. So quite a good job. Thanks to JP Cullen for their work there, and that's all gone according to plan. Over at the high school, I hopefully you noticed in my report that, and you've seen out on site that we do have the metal panels for the gym. That, of course, was our big setback from a scheduling standpoint. So the gym is now watertight, and that's opened up a lot of work on the interior. So the back side of those metal panels are being covered now with studs and drywall. The final painting of the ceiling has happened. We're really all pushing towards the last feature, which had to be done in dry conditions, which is the gym floor. So we hope that can commence probably in the third week of July. So pushing towards a September finish. Can't tell you exactly what day in September that'll be, but trying to deliver that space in September. The rest of the spaces have gone fairly well. We did turn over the pool for use. The event entry, we've talked about in the past, is kind of one of our last areas for risk. We have experienced a little bit of that. If you had been in what we call the Wonky Corridor, which is out in front of the event entry, we have had to tear down and rebuild additional sections of wall that hadn't been planned for. And we call it the Wonky Corridor because the floor in there had sloped as things had settled. So really by removing that exterior wall and recasting that floor, we've taken away that condition. So I'm going to come back to that when I give you a little bit of financial report at the end. But that event entry is going quite well. The expansion of the weight room, which is over the new loading dock for the kitchen, structurally that's all in place, and they're now working on finishes there. The connection from the weight room to the wrestling room has occurred, and they're basically working on tiling and installation of lockers in your existing locker room. So that's all come together quite well. I didn't include a financial summary with this report. There weren't significant changes. Our last change order was change order number 6, which was reported to you back in either my April or May report. But we will be executing change order number 7 in the coming weeks. And just to give you a little preview of that corridor, replacement of the Wonky Corridor, is a big part of that. Also, there was a significant piece structurally found where we introduced a sliding glass wall in the student services area. In fact, there's a picture of it in the report there on the left-hand side there. That turned out to be a completely load-bearing partition. And so a large structural steel member had to be brought in to carry the load above that sliding glass door, and that was not previously expected. It's also a number of things. We've expanded the scope of painting to some areas that weren't planned, but were really going to look a little bit shabby with all the new spaces around it. So expanded that scope, and then it's just kind of some miscellaneous pickups of changes made to the HVAC system in the STEM wing to kind of change the strategy for dust collection and how that interfaced with the supply air into the space. So that'll be coming to you. That's about $140,000 in change order. That will take your owner contingency down from where it was in May at about $420,000 to down in the $250,000, $270,000 range. Still good to be in this spot in the development of the project and still have $270,000 in owner contingency. But that will be executed and officially presented to you with my next report. I think that's it. Any questions?
I just drove by the west lot and it's completely packed. Every
I did
space
too.
is being used for the T-ball, which I saw was going. I'm like, who is at the high school already? And it was completely filled with T-ball people. So good use, sorry.
Mike, you weren't at the last meeting, but we saw the pool the day before the last meeting, so that looks beautiful, fantastic. So thanks for all your work with that.
Yeah, it's an exciting space. I think the windows, looking out at your fields, all your swimmers heretofore have been down under, right? With no windows. So
So thanks. Any questions or comments for Mr. Huffman?
Just a quick one, Mike. You had mentioned in the report the rework in the world languages and student services. Was that related to the floor issue you were talking about, or other surprises as they did demolition, or?
in world languages, student services,
Yeah.
not sure what I mentioned in the report there. That's gone basically per the plan, those three,
Okay.
4 or 5 classrooms. It's really at the student services area, not world language, but student services area where, yes,
Okay.
we had to introduce that structural beam. There were a number of things on the punch list there where we sent them back in. So that has delayed our owner occupancy of that space. I don't think there was a critical date there, but we had to decide, do you hold off on the furniture? Decided to go ahead with delivery of the furniture, which happened just last week. And they're doing some of those punch list activities around the furniture that's in the space. But yeah, there were a couple of quality issues that we said, you're not quite there. You got to send your crews back in.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else for Mike? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next is the superintendent update on the Milton Forward Plan. Mr. Dahman.
Good here. Yeah, a couple things that I want to update the board on. Across the county, as vaccinations have increased, the positive COVID cases across our district per 10,000 residents has continued to decline. It's at its lowest point in quite a while. There now are a little bit over 79,000 who have received their first vaccine and about 72,000 that have received their second vaccine across the county. There was one COVID death in Rock County over the past week, which is a good trend too, as those number of deaths continue to go down. And this past week, we had our first week with our new procedure for masks being optional for students and staff, and that's going very well too. We have a number of people who are continuing to wear masks and a number that are choosing not to, both indoors and outdoors. Our plan is that at our next board meeting on July 12th, we'll bring a recommended Milton Forward Plan for the coming school year for the board to consider. Any questions or comments from board members?
All right, thank you, Rich. Next, we have a presentation, the idea and compliance updates from the Director of Student Services, Susan Probst. Susan.
Thanks for having me. They know it should be now. We're good? Got it. Yep. It's twofold. One is to share some information about special ed, and the second is to update you on how we're meeting DEI's expectations. Kim asked me to beep every time no, she didn't. So a little bit about special education. First of all, what it is and what it isn't. It's state and federal mandated. It's students meet criteria in categories, and then they also need specially designed instruction. It's about finding the least restrictive environment for students, as well as a continuum of services based on each individual student. Each student has an IEP, and there are 442 students with disabilities in the district. It's about procedural safeguards, and it's about due process. The things that we do are very predictable. What it's not where kids go to get extra help. It's not about focusing on passing classes and completing homework, and it's not the ungraded kids, because these students work on the same standards that other students work on. We have a lot of people in the district who support students with disabilities. General ed teachers do a lot of work with students with disabilities as well. But we have special ed teachers, speech paths, occupational therapists, one physical therapist, our school psychs, our special education paraprofessionals. The counselors have a role with students with disabilities, as well as our principals and associate principals. Each of those individual education plans, there's a meeting every year, and we have an associate principal or a principal who participates in those meetings. There are 12 types of disabilities, categories of disabilities, and each of them has a different criteria sheet, and they also look at different types of specially designed instruction. If you ever want to look at something interesting, go to the DPI website and look up one of these, and they'll give you the criteria sheet of what we look at when we're looking to, we're not looking to identify, we're looking to see if they qualify. Now to how we're responding to how we're meeting DPI's expectations. So special ed's been around for about 45 years, when IDEA was passed in 1975. And historically, what the process has been to evaluate special education is a self-assessment. Every 5 years, DPI says, these are the IEPs you need to look at, and then they give us a 16-page document that you go through each IEP to check for compliance. And the focus was always on paperwork, whether it's accurate, and it was compliant. What changed 5 years ago is we discovered that special education and kids who've been involved in special education, we hadn't changed the output for them, the outcomes for them. When they graduated from high school, their opportunities were still limited. So some mandates were changed that we needed to change the way we looked at special education. And what that process is what I'm going to share with you next. It's about promoting continual growth. They set a bar, but that bar doesn't stay there. It continues to go up. And when I show you some of the graphs, I think it'll help make a little bit more sense. Our score last year was 94 out of 100. That's something to be very, very proud of. 94 out of 100 is a very good score. And if you compare us to other districts, our score is high. And you'll see on some of the graphs. I'm going to show you two graphs that actually show you how we compare to other districts. If you want to see the entire report, you can find that on the DPI website as well. Okay, so I have 3 of these charts in here because that's how many indicators that they are. On the very left-hand side, you have the indicator list. You can see the number. Then you have the name. Then you have what type. And it's either going to be results or compliance. And there might be one other one, but most of them are either results or compliance. Then you have the Milton rate, and it's not out of 100. So the rate is different for each indicator. And then you have a 2-point cutoff. For each of these indicators, you can get 2 points, you can get 1 point, or you can get 0 points, okay? And if you just look down on the right-hand side, you're gonna see that we have 1 point and 2 points. I'm gonna talk about 2 items on this chart. One is the graduation in 4 years. If you'll notice, we only received 1 point on that. If you look at the Milton rate, 84.62, and the 2-point cutoff weight, we're not that far off to get the 2 points. But here's why I'm not worried about it at all. We have students with disabilities from 3 to 21, age 3 to 21. So you can't have kids who are in the district who are 21 graduate in 4 years, right? They're going to have to be here longer. And the other part of special education is not every student should graduate in 4 years, because we need to do some transition activities with them to get them ready to be able to be more successful. So this year, the data that's on there is from 18-19. We had 38 students with disabilities who were seniors that year. 5 of them came back, and 3 of them participated in Project Search, which is a great intern opportunity working with the hospital, learning different skills at the hospital, and 1 of them graduated in the 5th year. So when I see a 1 point on this, I look at the specific students, and that tells us the story. Okay. The second one I want to talk about is the last item on that page, and that's the Ela Proficiency. If you look, we have a 1 point on that one as well. We had a 15.64, and the 2-point cutoff rate was 15.86. Kim, can you go to the next slide? Because this shows you what that actually looks like. That blue mountain is all the districts in the state. And if you look, we are at the 65th percentile, which means that we're doing better than 65% of the other districts in the state. So that's something to be proud of. But we also just scored a 1. The green color up there is a 2, and the kind of yellowish color is a 1, and then where there is no color, would be a 0. So we're almost to the green, we're short. So we have a little bit of work to do. We're ahead of some of the other districts. But when you look at individual students with disabilities, we're going to want to dig into this one, and we've set a goal to improve that for next year. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to that. This is based on the Wisconsin Forward, the ACT, and the Dynamic Learning Map. The Wisconsin Forward is 3rd grade through 8th grade. The ACT is at the high school, and the Dynamic Learning Map is about 1% of our population takes something completely different because they're working toward different standards. The second chart, I'm going to talk about 2 items on here as well. Same thing, indicator name type, and you see compliance on there versus results. Compliance is either a true or false, okay? You either got it or you don't. And we were flagged for disproportionate discipline. Again, this isn't one I'm overly worried about because our cell size is so small that they don't know if they can flag us or not. So they look at all the kids that have been disciplined, and then they look to see how many kids with disabilities have been disciplined, and then they compare the discipline. But because the numbers are so small, we actually have to go through a self-assessment to look at how we're disciplining and how we make those decisions on the discipline, and that will tell us whether we're out of compliance or not. But at this point, we're just flagged, and we have to go through that process. That is due November 15th, and if you want to update on that and how we looked, let me know. The second one I want to talk about, which is also a goal of ours, is the educational environment for 6 through 21. That's age 6 through 21. If you notice, our Milton rate is 70.25, and our points are 70. So we've got 2 points on that, but it's still an area of concern for us. Again, if you'll go to the next one, you'll see that same chart. So if you just look at percentile, here we're only in the 35th percentile. And that to me is a lot lower than a 65 percentile. It means that we're only doing better than 35% of the other districts in the state. You have where the mountain is, and the mountain is over in the green section. And we are at the very end of the green section. So this will be an area of concern for us as well. Environmental code, how that's determined. Every IEP talks about a student's strengths and what they have a difficult time doing, and then there are goals that are set. And those goals are based on a root cause analysis of why that student is not being successful. Then the last part of that IEP talks about where are we going to work on those items. And the environmental code says how much of that time is spent with typically developing peers in gen ed and how much time is spent in special ed. And what we know historically is the more time they spend in special ed, the less time they have access to really rigorous curriculum, as well as kids learn from each other as much as they learn from their teacher. And so we want them to be with typically developing peers as much as possible when they can still make gains on their IEP goals. And then the last slide. This one's all on compliance. So for instance, preschool transitions. We have students who are 3 in the district who have IEPs. We get many of those students from birth to 3. So birth to 3 says, hey, Susan, we've got a student who's 2 years, 6 months, and we have 6 months to transition that student into the school if they meet the school criteria. Kind of the same thing with post-secondary transition plans. Every student with an IEP, when they turn 14, they have a transition plan, and that transition plan already at 14 is looking at what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do after school? Is there a career path that you want to go? Are you looking at a tech school? Are you looking at a job? And then we start to talk about and figuring out how do we support kids. And you notice our percentile or our rate is 100%. We're solid there. Last slide. These are our two goals for this next year, the environmental code, 6 through 21, and our ELA proficiency. The foundation for making gains on both of these is the multi-leveled systems of support, our universal strategies. What do we use to educate all kids? Is it rigorous? Are we continuing to improve there? But the three areas of special ed that build on top of that are our specially designed instruction. How are we monitoring progress on that specially designed instruction? And then helping kids learn how to advocate for themselves so they know what their strengths are and where their areas of growth are so that they can be part of those conversations on making a pathway forward. I'm grateful that I met with each of the principals to talk about the environmental code in their building because I can break it down by building to see where we're at in each building. And then because they attend every IEP, they're able to find as many pathways as possible that kids can be with typically developing peers, if at all possible. Any questions on all of this or any of this?
Susan, quick.
Oh, hang on. Quick question on the slide 6.
Tell me the title.
It's the IDEA 2020 LEA determinations.
With indicator 1?
Yes. So the graduation rate plus the dropout rate is roughly 85%. Does that mean the rest of those students are graduating in year 5 or 6 then potentially? Or where is that roughly 15%? Where are they, that gap?
Okay, so are you adding those two numbers, graduation and dropout?
Yeah, I just assume they should add up. Either you finish or you
Nice
don't.
try.
It's not that simple.
No.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be great if all numbers added up to 100?
It would be, wouldn't
And they
it?
don't. And that would be, life would be a lot easier. So I'm trying to see if one of those charts, so if you look at the slide right after that,
Sure.
notice that only went to 40.
Mhm.
So you can't add the two together to get to where that was. I believe that year we only had one dropout.
Okay.
And I believe that how they determine that is the number of kids with disabilities and the number of kids who drop out and they get that percentage. But there might be a comparison to the state's data as well, but don't hold me to that. I can find the answer if you'd like me to.
I was just curious, when you talked about year 5 and year 6, I assume that encompasses some of the folks in this group here. So, okay.
It's not
I'm
really,
satisfied with that.
it's not really fair that we get dinged for that graduation one, because they tell us you're supposed to keep them. I know fair's where you take a pig for a blue ribbon, but it's not fair that we get dinged for it because we're supposed to keep them if they're not ready, right? If they haven't met graduation requirements and if they're not ready for that transition piece. So,
Okay.
and if they drop out, we try to.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Susan? Lots of great info here.
Thank you.
Many thanks to you and all your staff. Keep up the great work.
Got a very strong team. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Susan. Next is the HR committee report. First up is discussion and possible action on 2021-22 athletics and activities staffing baseline. Mr. Tukendorf.
All right, thanks, Rick. In your board packet, you'll see there's a memo from me titled 21-22 Athletics, Activities, and Advisor Staffing Baseline. As we continue our conversations in establishing staffing baselines, the HR, payroll, and athletics and activities departments have established a 21-22 count by location and category that includes the number of positions. This is not FTE, and a budgeted compensation amount. The high school athletics category has been reviewed and updated, and based off of their staffing needs, and they're finalizing the review of their activities and advisors soon. It is the goal of the HR and payroll department to review athletics and activities at other locations and categories throughout the rest of the 21-22 year. And if you'll note on your memo, the 12 positions in the district-wide category / location are comprised of department heads, lead teachers, and summer work. At our next HR committee on July 7th, Jeff Spiewak will be sharing his department's 21-22 review, including comparisons that he has done. Also, HR will be presenting 21-22 letters of appointment for the district's athletics, activities, and advisor positions for board consideration. Any questions on the memo or the number of positions based off of location or category?
Hey, has additive increases been looked at in the last 5 years, 3 years, or do they stay stagnant?
They
So they're
up until this
competitive
year.
with other districts is what I'm asking.
Yes, and up until this year, they have stayed pretty stagnant. Jeff has done a great job of reviewing those underneath the athletics department, and Jeremy is currently, Jeremy and Jeff are working on the activities, the advisor positions. So more to come on that when we talk at our next HR committee meeting and our next board meeting. And then throughout the rest of this year, HR and payroll will be working with the middle school, the one position at Northside, and looking at those district-wide positions as well.
Any other questions or comments regarding this topic?
Maybe I missed this. What was the middle school others, the 22?
The middle school others, those are the advisor type positions that they have. So you have the middle school activities and clubs, but there's also advisors and there's other lead. But the district-wide one covers district-wide lead, building heads. A lot of this is remnants of pre-Act 10 that we as the district have put underneath a district account versus managed by individual buildings.
This is an action item, so I would entertain a motion if someone would like to.
Yes, sir. Mr. Acting President, I will move that 218 support staff athletics activities and advisor positions be the staffing baseline used for the 2021-2022 school year.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion from Joe, seconded by Dave to approve the motion. Any other questions or comments on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Next is discussion and possible action on 2021-22 teacher staffing.
And there's a memo from John Lyon and myself on this agenda item as well. John and I are recommending the addition of a new 4th grade teacher at Northside due to the projected enrollment class size of other 4th grade classrooms. And John will speak to a little bit more of those details outlined in the memo.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening. So we are finalizing classroom placements at Northside, and we currently had 11 sections of 3rd grade that are going to be 4th graders next year at Northside. So looking at our students in each class, in each homeroom, we're looking at 26 and 27 students in 4th grade next year, 23 students in 5th grade, and then 25 and 26 students at 6th grade. So when we were reviewing that, we thought that number was just a little bit high. So we wanted to propose to the board that we add that 4th grade position for next year, which would bring our enrollment in 4th grade down to 24 and 25 in each classroom. So also reflected in those numbers, just a note to the board, are the 27 students returning to Milton or have enrolled with Mrs. Olson in the Family Enrollment Center, several coming to us from homeschool, Arise, neighboring districts. And typically at Northside, we gain students over the summer months. So I would anticipate additional students coming to us in August based on the numbers that I had shared with you.
Just a quick question, long-term, I noticed that the staff position is being supported with ESSER funds, which is great. Looking long-term, will they, assuming this person stays, I couldn't speak to a long-term plan on that one, Dave. Fair enough.
So you don't know how you'll pay for it after this next year?
Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ESSER funds, I believe, are 2 or 3 years?
But if I could just comment, because we're making, every year, we look at what we're doing. And we'll hit on this later when we come to the budget portion. We're talking about numbers in our class sizes. We have a student, we determined that that's a priority and a need we have to fill. We were going to fill it this year, likely using the ESSER funds. Okay, then as we go into the next budget cycle, we'll go through this again. And when we get to the budget conversation, we actually reduced a position. So although we talk about, and I appreciate, right, how we're going to pay for it next year, we're going to ask that question about a lot of things the following year, not just this position. So it's really going to be rolled into the bigger conversation of prioritizing student needs. And so it may end up that we will continue to use the ESSER money to fund this position. It may turn out that our membership, when we talk about the revenue limit, will go up and we'll have more resources through the revenue limit. So it's just, to me, this is kind of like one step in the process. And then we continually talk about prioritizing because the conversation doesn't generally change. And numbers change, and then that's a different conversation. But I do appreciate the questions about the literature and the sustainability. And that is really something that we are not just looking at an annual basis, but really a continual basis. So in our conversations, we talked about some other potential part-time positions that John might be able to forego and to help balance this. And we will continue to have those conversations as an administrative team. Did you want to add anything, Rich, or?
You hit on the things that I was going to share.
But we would, Gary, we'd also be getting money in if we have students moving into our district that are included in these numbers. So that would help offset that also.
Correct. And I'll just hit on it now if I can, and then we'll go faster when I get to the budget part.
Kind of a good
if you would like
problem to have.
in context, right. One of the things that we don't know until fall is our resident membership and the open enrollment in and out numbers. And if you recall, that resident count drives our revenue limit, and the open enrollment piece also had a positive impact on our budget last year. And so we'll wait to see how those numbers shake out this year. But if you recall, when I did the pie charts, we have $3 million in expenditures in open enrollment. So that is one of our bigger pieces. And so whichever way the parents choose with to meet the needs of their kids, right? We're on trying to figure that out. But you're correct. If we have more non-residents attending that support, continue to support John's numbers, then that's also the open enrollment revenue is also a resource as well.
And it says in here that it would be $80,000. I assume that's not set in stone because depending on the experience of the teacher.
You want to do it? You go for it. Okay. I know the answer.
Oh, you
just want to be on the record. I know the answer.
Okay, so the 80,000 is an earmark. That is based off of where a semi-seasoned teacher we would employ at. We look back at what our averages are. Maybe it's around a 55,000. Looking at family health insurance. So we basically, on a budgeting side, plan for worst case scenario. So 80,000 is high. If we have somebody coming in right out of college, the number will definitely be lower than that.
And we also did talk at the HR meeting. We want to make sure and keep these class sizes at a manageable level.
Can I speak to one other thing, just to the long-term piece too, that I forgot to share in my opening, is the current projected enrollment for the fourth grade is 265 that year before. The next year's third graders is 230, so it's a little bit of a discrepancy there. But then right behind that, we're back to 255 again. And it has been my experience again at Northside that we end up getting students from neighboring districts, parochial schools coming to us. So we're going to be right in that range between 230 and 265 students for the foreseeable future.
This is another action item. If someone would like to take action on this.
I would make a motion to fourth grade teacher position starting in the 2020 school year.
We have a motion from Jen, seconded by Shelley, to approve the position as presented. Any more questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, John. Next up is discussion of possible action on seasonal, occasional, and temporary employee wage rates.
Okay, so in your board packet is also another memo from me. And this outlines, as Rick had stated, the payroll or the review of seasonal, occasional, and temporary employee wage rates. The payroll and the Human Resources Department have created a list for the board's review and possible consideration. The district has had these rates approved in past handbooks and in past appendices, but we have not presented all of these rates under one document to the Board of Education. So the Human Resources Department continues to review and make gains in streamlining its processes and procedures, and to share this information with the HR committee and with the Board of Education. So going forward, we're looking to bring these rates for the board to review on a yearly basis.
Any questions for Chris on this one?
One more quick note I'd like to make is that we are going to continue to bring forth any new hires that would apply, that would be hired within these positions. So you'll still see all of these new hires coming forward for your possible approval underneath the staffing update.
Yeah, I just have a question on the seasonal based on the overriding need for lifeguards. I know we're good here in Milton just based on the history of what their programming is. But again, and I think I brought this up many years ago too, starting lifeguard at $8 an hour when they have CPR, first aid, and lifeguard training that costs well over $300 to take now, doesn't even pay for their class from the hours they're making for the summer. So I hope we relook at that and look at updating that and then making it more competitive in the future. So.
And we will touch base with Lance on reviewing those rates, and we'll bring those forward once we have a comparison and look at what other districts.
I just feel that's a specialty area with their certifications that they have to have.
Okay. Thank you.
This is another action item. If someone would like to propose that.
I move that the 2021-2022 seasonal, occasional, and temporary rate list be implemented for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
I have a motion from Dave, seconded by Leslie, to approve the rates as presented. Any other questions or comments on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Next up is the Finance Committee report. Joe.
Okay, Finance Committee met here a week ago. Finance Committee met a week ago, and I did a little rearranging of the meeting time and then wasn't able to come to the meeting that I rearranged. So my apologies to my committee members and to Carrie and whatnot. My day took a left turn on me, as sometimes they do that. So at any rate, I am going to invite Carrie up to share with you and or any of the other committee members if they need to. The topics there were allocation of ESSER funds. We have discussion of possible action on the preliminary budget, and then current year budget performance. And we can talk a little strategy, or we had reviewed a little strategy over some possible things we can do as we near the end of this budget in 2 days. So go ahead, Carrie. I guess A is allocation of ESSER funds, if you want to start there.
Okay. And that being said, and committee members, if you feel you'd like to do an introduction, I'll yield. Otherwise, I'll do the same introduction I did before. In May, we brought to the board a plan on how to distribute or use, if you will, or allocate the second round of CARES Act money called ESSER 2. And that focus is on improving instruction and improving our teacher skills and the student experience. And so I will actually let Ryan and Susan, if you wish, kind of review the current plans for the use of those funds. If you recall, there's about $880,000 in that first round of ESSER 2 money.
Okay, so good evening. I won't read from the memo, but I'll just share a few highlights as Carrie shared. Both Susan and I led up this process, and it was exciting and fun process. It was really collaborative, so it was exciting to see a lot of the great ideas coming forward. At the top of our list, one of our main goals is we were aligned to our mission and vision. We were very purposeful with these funds, and we had a solid process and criteria set aside as we looked into all these great ideas. We really wanted to dive deep into improving our universal curriculum and universal instruction. How can we support our teacher capacity and skills and build the skills they might need teaching in different environments? And how would we evaluate our student impact using solid measurable data and make that part of our MLSS process and support as well. As Carrie stated, we had about $880,000 in that initial funds. I will go down one short rabbit hole like I did in the committee as well. Right now, we are also eligible for some additional ESSER 2 funds as well. So all the districts that were under a certain threshold and that initial allocation are eligible for a second round of ESSER 2s. We just got the webinar that I spoke to about in the committee level on Friday afternoon, which highlights how we have to do the specific count and then fill out the forms for the state. That is due early August, and we should find out after that point how much additional funds we're getting. We are estimating it will be $300,000 to $400,000 additional on top of that $880,000, but that is to be continued. So we've allocated about $511,000 so far, and we've put kind of a hold on the spending as of right now for several reasons. One, we didn't want to rush out, spend it all right away, and just find out we have some additional needs later on. Also partially with the state, with some of the conversations that are happening at the state level in terms of what the state budget's going to look like, we thought it might be wise for us to hold on, wait a little bit, see how that situation rises. Look at what needs come up in August and September, and then plan accordingly with our admin team as well. The areas that we really focused on were in the universal instruction, supporting our PLCs, and some support for interrupted learning. And there's a lot that is within those monies as well. Those are some high estimates. And what we also discussed is bringing some more details of what's in that plan to our next curriculum committee. We're looking to set something up in July because we have a few other options we want to bring. We want to bring our updated multi-level system support plan. We want to bring up some information with middle school trimesters, and then share some PD and some of the purchases specifically within the ESSER 2 funds to the curriculum committee come July. So, what questions would you have for Susan and I, or? All right, excellent. I look forward to talking to the curriculum committee in July. Thank you.
Item B, then, is discussion and possible action on our 21-22 preliminary budgets. Ms. Carey, take it away.
Okay. So we are in the process of putting together our 21-22 budget. We have actually been working on that for a while. If you recall, the board made decisions around wages. We've extended teacher contracts and others' contracts. And so this is the time of year where I put it all together for our preliminary budget. This preliminary budget will be the budget that we will take to the annual meeting and budget hearing on August 23rd. There will likely be a couple changes before we get there, and those are typically related to We'll wait and see what the state happens at the state budget level. And then also, if we have meaningful updates to the work that we've already done, and we have time to do them before we have to do our publication for the annual meeting, we will do so. Usually when I talk about budget, you're going to hear me talk about process, and we'll do that once again, right? This is the board's first step in that process. And then to approve a budget for the annual meeting. And then, as I said, in the fall, we'll come back again, and the board will formally adopt that budget and pass a tax levy. And then as we continue to live our year, we will come back again then in August to revise our adopted budget. So the budget that you have before you is in the DPI format. And the first piece I want to talk about are some of the expenditure pieces. And as we know, there are increases to wages, utilities, transportation. We also know that we had decreases in dental insurance, and then also our capital lease payments for our computers. So those are things that we kind of knew going into this. With concerns about being in the first year of that state biennial budget process, we were cautious, and we asked budget managers to withhold 5% and build their budgets using 95% of their typical allocation. Hopefully in the fall, we will be able to restore those funds, seeing how things work out, hopefully. In addition, on the expenditure side, so that you're aware to balance the budget, you've heard me talk about the interfund transfer to Fund 46 when we ended up in a favorable position last fall with our numbers for open enrollment and resident count. We budgeted an interfund transfer. We have also reduced a teaching position, a world language position at the high school based on student requests and needs. And we also reduced some allocations related to equipment. If you recall last year, we did a technology investment of about $260,000. This year, it's closer to $100,000. So that was another place where reductions took place to make the budget happen and balance. And then on the revenue side, oh, I'm sorry, there's one thing that you need to be aware of, and I'm going to talk about it on the expenditure side, although it's going to hit both sides and hits multiple places in 10. The MECAS, Alternative Education Program that we have done as a cooperative program, financially lives in Fund 99. We are no longer going to have that as a cooperative living in Fund 99. It's becoming part of our Fund 10 budget. The program still exists. There's still an opportunity for Edgerton to participate, but they will do it through a tuition agreement rather than a cooperative program. And I think that's one of those things, as life changed, we had a co-op, but we had significant majority of the students in the co-op. So the program still exists, but we're going to account for it differently. So you will see that when you look through the budget then, that we're no longer going to use Fund 99. So on the revenue side then, you've heard me say, right, our budget is based on the information that we know at a point in time, right? And so we always are waiting for the fall data with regard to the membership, and then also enrollment, which includes the non-resident students, okay, that drive our revenues. Another layer we have, which you guys are aware of and we have talked about a bit, right, is the state still has not made a decision. They're talking about the assembly making some decisions this week. And so I think if you recall when we talked about it before, I have the assumptions listed for now. I'm going to keep our resident FTE flat, and our summer school membership is going to be increased so that it's closer to a prior year level. And then when we talk about those increments, there's the low revenue increment, which if districts are a low revenue district, there's a low revenue ceiling. The last biennium, we benefited from that as we're a low revenue district. I did not increase that, but I did increase the per member by $150. And I did that knowing that if it doesn't go through, we will end up using our ESSER 3 money, and if necessary, part of our ESSER 2 money to backfill that hole, okay? And as you are aware and have heard us say, we need to be mindful of using one-time money, right, to plug holes. Let me just see here, check my notes. I got that. Rich, at this point, did you want to share some information about the contract you had?
Yeah, I was contacted this week by our local member of the State Assembly, Don Vruwink, and he asked for some information on the impact of the state budget proposal on local education. I think he was contacting a lot of the neighboring school districts that he represents. And we shared out with him some information that he had asked about. He asked questions about our number of applicants for teaching positions and how that has changed over time. And so Chris Tukendorf looked back, he went back 4 years to the 2017-18 school year. And we saw a pretty significant decrease in a lot of different positions. He compared some of the positions that we hired both at that time and this time. And we're seeing extremely significant decreases in the number of applicants for positions. Even though we remain a desirable school district, there are some areas where we're struggling to get teachers to apply for positions. And I also shared with Don that while we strive to be efficient in our use of available resources, when we continue to have a budget with some areas that increase annually, an example of that might be our utility costs typically go up year to year, and we don't have a lot of control over those increases. So when we have some areas that typically go up annually, and when revenues don't keep pace with inflation, then we need to look for budget adjustments where we can. With about 80% of our expenditures being on staffing costs, when we have to make budget adjustments, that typically means that we have to not fill positions when they open or reduce our number of positions. With our conservative budgeting for the upcoming year, we are reducing one teaching position in an area where we felt that the student requests at the high school warranted being able to do that. But without an increase in the revenue limit, we anticipate the need for additional budget adjustments in the upcoming years. So we'll have to see how that plays out at the legislature.
Okay, then if you would, if we can just quickly, and I will be brief since we've talked about this quite a bit, but the second page of the document in your board book has a preliminary Fund 10 revenue estimate with the revenue limit. And what that demonstrates for you, right, are the two drivers that we talk about, and membership, which is full-time equivalency, and the formula uses a 3-year average, and then base revenue. And you would like your base revenue to increase every year, but if we have non-recurring exemptions and no increase, and you do the enrollment piece, okay, we just need to be aware that if we don't have any per pupil increase, that our base revenue is going to be flat, or we actually might end up with our base eroding. And we can talk about that more later, but just conceptually, when we talk about school finance, we need to be mindful of base revenue, and that's before we put our non-recurring exemption on top, okay? So it's just the money that follows us to the future, and we currently have a declining enrollment exemption. So if you look at that 21-22 column under declining enrollment exemption, right now it says there's $91,000 there, okay? That's one time. So that means next year we're not gonna have that. Now, every year the calculation does again, and you may get a new declining enrollment exemption, but that money doesn't follow us into the future to meet future needs. And the historical, the revenue limit, call it the rule of thumb, okay? When we're talking about revenue limits and you have non-recurring exemptions, like the declining enrollment exemptions, the rule of thumb is start scrutinizing your budget and look to make reductions, because again, as I'm saying, that money won't follow you into the future. So it's not, it's something that we need to be aware of. And as we work on budget building, we are scrutinizing. And it's not status quo, move forward. It's looking for efficiencies as we go. So that piece continues. Did you have any questions about the revenue limit? Otherwise, we'll just move on.
You said that the 91,000 is for this upcoming year. What was it this last year?
80,000. So on the second page of the document, it has the revenue limit. Okay, and the first line is membership. Okay, so there are exemptions. There's two kinds, just real quick. One is non-recurring, which means that you get it 1 year and then it goes away, or there's a recurring exemption. And so when I'm talking about the non-recurring, this is always one-time money that you don't get in the next year. Now, that being said, 1 year it was 58, 1 year it was 80. This year I'm projecting 91. We'll see where it lands. But when our enrollment levels off, because it's based on a 3-year average, whenever that decline stops, that's the year that you will kind of realize on the impact of that exemption, not following you into the future. I don't know if that made sense.
Why would it go up 30,000 or, well, 22,000, sorry.
The formula looks at 3-year averages. And so what I can give you, it would be easier. These are data points that were picked here historically. But what happens is the declining enrollment exemption compares 2 different 3-year averages. It's your prior 3 years and your current 3 years. And if your membership goes down, it backfills for you. And so our enrollment is big picture, fairly stable, but we have had declines. And then you remember last year, we weren't able to do summer school as we normally had. So that lower number now is in our 3-year average. So it's the comparison of those 2 3-year averages. And I would have to get out the worksheet to if you wanted to see. It might be easier and then you can see it.
Okay.
Rather than me explaining it. But that's why the number changes. What they do when your enrollment is declining is they give you a 1-year backfill opportunity because everything is based on that per member calculation.
Carrie, and I think 2017, 18, 19, those 3 classes were the biggest classes we had go through. Okay. And that lump, is that right, Jeremy? And then we saw a drop. Right, that was, so now we've seen that kind of decline also. That was an unusual bubble that went through.
The other thing I think we have going on in our community is that we have the bigger class size going out, the smaller coming in. But then, as Mr. Lyon was saying, we also kind of continue to have other incoming pupils across the grades. So instead of doing the traditional kindergarten senior year piece, it adds another layer of complexity. But Shelley has a detail piece I think you were asking about. All right. Then as we move on, the pie chart there is similar to the pie chart I shared with you last time. And this is the budget by object, which is kind of the what we are purchasing. And again, you can see the wages and benefits piece. And then there's a second document, which is the budget that I'm asking the board to approve for the annual meeting. And it's in the DPI format where you have revenue by source and then expenditures are by function or purpose. And one of the challenges in reviewing this data is it's hard to see patterns and trends because of COVID. When you look at the data, when you look at the distribution amongst the functions, another challenge with regard to this too, as I said, is we have moved Fund 99 into Fund 10 this year. So I usually look at the data and look for trends and changes, and I looked this time, and it's apparent that you can see in 2021 that we reassigned people to that undifferentiated curriculum, the 110, which typically is an elementary classroom, and we moved people out of some of the support positions. Like the reading is in that regular curriculum bucket. And then also the instructional staff services has coaches in it. So there was an awful lot of movement this year as people were working to meet student needs within the resources that we had.
Okay, any other questions for Carrie? If not, I will move to approve the 2021-2022 preliminary budget as it was presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Joe, seconded by Leslie, to approve the 2021-22 preliminary budget. Any other questions or comments on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. And then one last piece for you. Item C, current year budget performance and year-end budget
strategies. So we engaged in a conversation about the size of our budget, how it performs, and looking at year-end activities. A lot of it around fund balance and the choice to look at increasing that or investing more in that capital projects fund. And we concluded that we will come back in July for the board based on the estimates that I have to make a decision. Did you guys want to add anything else? That's pretty succinct. We're good with that? Okay. Thank you.
All righty, that completes the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Carrie. Next, moving on to miscellaneous. First is action on staffing reports. And those are listed in board docs.
I'll move to approve the staffing report as presented.
I'll second.
Have a motion by Joe, seconded by Leslie, to approve the staffing report. Any questions or comments on those? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, action on gifts and donations, which are also located in board docs.
I'll make a motion to approve the gifts and donations and gratitude.
I'll second.
Motion by Leslie, seconded by Dave, to approve the gifts and donations. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, meeting dates.
We have a couple upcoming meetings that are
goals section, we're going to get back on some possible dates in August for that, and get that information out as soon as we have it. So, policy committees, dates in time, sometime in July, August, and then also curriculum committee.
I think I'll wait and check with Mike regarding policy. When he's going to be available.
And how about curriculum?
I'm gonna just let them know. Flexible. I just send that.
We just sent, we just sent something out to the committee and get some possibilities, right? That's all we've got.
A question, you mentioned 2 regular board meetings in July. We usually have done 1. Do we need to do 2? What's your?
We had changed it last year, and a lot of it was due to COVID.
Yeah, I just didn't know agenda-wise, if there's stuff we need to do, of course we can do it, but,
We have let people know that on the July 12th board meeting, we will be bringing up the forward plan. And then the board did approve the calendar for upcoming meetings. But Chris, is there something related to HR that we need to get a timeline on?
We constantly have our new hires that are coming in and like to be able to get those contracts from our teaching staff approved ASAP so that we can secure our staff before they potentially interview with other locations. That's always a plus when it comes from the HR side.
It's not that I don't like you folks, but one